You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome. I'm Esther, Awoniyi. Many thanks for joining us today. On today's show, we'll focus on Nigeria's new electricity roadmap. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow and send comments, your thoughts to my Twitter handle. It's at Esther O. Awoniyi. The Nigerian and German multinational conglomerate Siemens recently signed an agreement for a roadmap to ramp up Nigeria's power supply. But how will this work out? Onyeche Tifase, CEO of Siemens Nigeria, joins me now to tell us how. Onyeche, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Esther. Pleasure to be here.
But this is not the first time Siemens is, partnering or doing business with the federal government, as it were, especially in the power sector. So just give us a brief, just to understand what it is that Siemens does or has been doing with the federal government, especially in the area of power.
Siemens has been very active in the energy sector for Nigeria, so not only for power, but also in the oil and gas market.
Okay.
But when it comes to power, what we've done mainly in the past is support the government with construction of power plants. The Geregu 1 and Geregu 2 power plants in Kogi State were built by Siemens. We also supported the government with building the Afan power plant in River State. On the energy side, more of oil and gas, we also have a service center in Port Harcourt that provides a lot of services to the international oil companies who are joint ventures with the federal government of Nigeria. More recently, we've been collaborating with the government on the electrification roadmap for Nigeria because we see that as a massive priority for the country. And in essence, we haven't just developed a solution for the infrastructure, but we've worked very closely with the government to come up with a concept that we think will stand the test of time.
Okay, because I was going to ask how, what led up to this, why Siemens, in the first place, and what has led up to this moment, to this roadmap. So let's talk about the role that Siemens is going to be playing here. What we hear, what we're being told right now is that it's a 6-year project, as it were, to take power output from 4,000 where it is right now to 7,000 in the next 2 years, and then subsequent 2 years to 11,000 megawatts. Talk us through this process.
Yes, exactly. I think where we've seen this idea startup is we've been engaging with the government on trying to advise on how to resolve the issues along the energy value chain. And why Siemens? It's really because we have a very strong portfolio and competence across that entire value chain. When you talk about power, you're actually starting from the oil and gas sector. And we have solutions for oil and gas, and that integrate with power generation to transmission and to distribution, all the way to the end consumer. Siemens has a very robust portfolio. We're one of the only companies in the world that has this full value chain competence, knowledge, and solution portfolio. So when we've come to the government, we've said, look, the issues of the power sector there have been several attempts at resolving them. We know that some of these attempts, over the years, we've seen very minor gains. We're still talking about, as you said, an average of 4.5 or sometimes even lower capacity being delivered to the end consumers. We know that operationally, we have about 7 gigawatts operational capacity in the grid. How do we get all that capacity out to the end consumers? And that is really the major issue the government faces. But this is an ambitious government that wants to also grow its economy, wants to ensure that it's competitive in essence in Africa and beyond. So the targets for power cannot stop at resolving the 7 gigawatt issue. We're also proposing solutions to achieve a 25 gigawatt capacity. Now, many timelines are being bandied in the press, but these timelines are precedent upon several solutions being delivered or many gaps being closed. So we haven't committed to specific timelines as such.
So there is no 6-year
There is no 6-year plan. Some press releases or articles have also proposed a 43 gigawatt solution. It's not 43 gigawatts. It's an extension of the grid from, as you said, 4 to 5 to up to 7 gigawatts. So in the first phase, about a 2+ gigawatt increase in generation capacity being delivered to the end consumer. In a second phase, there's a further expansion to 11 gigawatts. And in the third phase, a further expansion to 25 gigawatts. Yeah. And that's where people, I think, have consolidated these values and called it a 43, 44 gigawatt project.
Okay, let's take a few steps backward. I mean, you've been observing and also playing in the power sector. In your opinion, your perspective, what are the major challenges? I mean, over the decades, billions of, not even naira, dollars have been spent. We've had policy reforms, we've even had a privatization, but the gains have not been commensurate to the amount of money that has been put into this very troublesome power sector. In your opinion, what are those major issues that you see and you believe that Siemens can come in and help tackle them?
Yes, you're right, completely, Esther. The power sector has lost hundreds of billions of dollars over the past 2-3 decades, and the issues that we found are relating to the weakness in the grid. So the first thing we thought about is, how does Nigeria achieve 25 gigawatts? It's not about the generation capacity in the first instance. It's really understanding the bottlenecks that are in the grid that are impeding the evacuation of existing capacity to end consumers. So we have issues with the automation of the grid. How do we protect and control those systems? We have issues with regards to the transmission network, where sometimes there are no lines to even evacuate power from the generation plants, or some lines are overloaded. Then the same thing at the distribution level, so distribution from 33, 11 kV and downwards as well. There's weak infrastructure, there's obsolete equipment, there's limited automation of the grid as well, so sending signals to substations sometimes is even done manually. And we're saying we have the portfolio to support with resolving these issues. But I think what complements these solutions we're providing is also we have a very strong advisory arm that is able to understand power sector issues. They advise various governments worldwide. So a lot of the German renewable plan was also supported by solutions or ideas from Siemens. Okay. So we have a very strong advisory arm. They're also active in other countries in Africa. We've also provided some advice to the discos here in Nigeria. And we've said, let's understand what these issues are in the grid. Let's come up with solutions that are best fit to resolve them, and not just subscribe or over specify what should be done to resolve this, so that whatever we're investing, you see the returns. And that's what Siemens has proposed as in phase 1. So phase 1 is saying that we understand very well what these issues are. These are the obvious problems. Let's resolve that. And there are other plants coming online that will expand the grid capacity. How do we ensure that the grid is also expanded to evacuate that additional capacity coming out? And that's phase 2. Before we go to phase 2, and I think this answers the timeline question, okay, we'll have to assess the grid in even more detail, so that the proposals that we have for phases 2 and 3 are best fit to the expansion that we're proposing. So we will do a more detailed deep dive into the transmission and distribution network. We'll understand what new generation capacity is coming online, and then we'll propose solutions to be able to evacuate so that we're not left with additional stranded capacity.
Okay, so Siemens, you've taken a step back and you've looked at the entire ecosystem or the entire structure of the Nigerian, what is called the Nigerian power sector, and you've said to yourself, this can be fixed. Exactly. We know what to do. Exactly. We know what the problems are. I ask this question, and I say this because, you know, it's become a very big riddle in Nigeria over the last couple of decades. It's become somewhat impossible, as it were, to solve. But, you know, obviously good news that Siemens has been able to figure this out. So, but where are you going to be starting from?
The first point is to start from really was engaging with the stakeholders. So those who know their systems even maybe better than us. Okay. The owners of the distribution companies, we've engaged with them very robustly. We've engaged with the Transmission Company of Nigeria, with the regulator, the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. We've engaged with other stakeholders. And of course, we've engaged very robustly with the Ministry of Power as well. We've gotten recommendations from the Ministry of Power on solutions that they think are best fit for the sector as well. I think what we did uniquely was really start with having these workshops or discussions with them and taking feedback from them on what their immediate problems were and what their longer term plans were for this infrastructure that they are custodians of, and trying to help them with that. So sometimes in some cases for some discos, the issue was really a lot more about electricity theft, meter tampering, and how do they understand the cash flows through their system? How do they create a transparent system? So even from that point of view, we have software systems for managing the metering systems to ensure that whatever is metered, there's less losses and more degree of collection.
Sorry about it. What about data? Knowing exactly where the customers who are actually consuming their power are. 1, 2, cost-reflective tariff. Exactly. Now, that has been one hurdle that they haven't been able to get past.
Yes. Exactly speaking about data, there's a meter data management system that Siemens is proposing to deploy. And the essence of that system is that all the way from generation down to distribution, you're able to capture the energy flows, so capacity-wise, understand what that cost is for that energy, because there's a tariff attached. understand where the losses are, and then be able to compute exactly what should be collected at the long run. You're also able to control the meter operations, because here we're proposing smart meters, and even where it's not smart meters, being able to understand the operation of those meters and be able to take quick actions to resolve any tampering or other actions.
Sorry to butt in again. Are those meters, these meters that you're talking about, are they going to be different from the ones that the MAP guys are already supplying?
They will not be different.
Because there's been a massive rollout of those meters already.
Exactly. That's a very good question. We're speaking to the meter asset providers as well. We've engaged with several of them. We've had meetings specifically with the DISCOs to discuss only about metering. So our metering experts have been here in Nigeria repeatedly. They're coming, of course, again and again to understand what the challenges are, what specification of meters do we have, how can we integrate the information from those existing meters into the meter data management system. And of course, we have to accommodate existing technology. I think the hope and the plan is that in the future, the ratio of non-smart to smart meters will be more in favor of smart meters to enable a more sophisticated and transparent system. But right now, of course, we are prepared to include in the program existing meters that MAPs are providing. You know,
I've had a couple of discos here, over the years and months, and they keep telling me, look, cost-reflective tariff is a big issue for us, among other, some of the issues that you've mentioned now. But listening to them, did you go away saying to yourself, okay, we understand what these problems are. These are problems that we can tackle. It's not a big mystery, because many times we appear to be running around in circles between the GENCOs and the DISCOs, accusation and counter-accusations. I'm just wondering, so do you understand and do you appreciate the problems that the DISCOs are actually experiencing?
Yes, Esther, you're completely right. The same conversations you've had with them, we have had as well, and they've highlighted these challenges. I think the NERC understands its responsibility really well, and that's, as the regulator, really under the purview of NERC to come up with a cost-reflective tariff. It's something they're working on already.
Okay.
I think what this past almost a full year, I think we've been working with the DISCOs and TCN since October last year, engaging with them repeatedly. What it's enabled us to do is to have everyone in one room, speaking to one another, and speaking very clearly about where their challenges are from a regulatory perspective. I think also communicating to NERC that we need a policy that enables a more efficient sector. And NERC has received that message very well, and I believe they're working on that.
Thank you for your time so far. We're just going to pause here and take a break and come back and pick up from where we left off. I'll be speaking to Onyeche Tifase. She's the CEO of Siemens Nigeria. If you're just joining us, Onyeche Tifase, CEO of Siemens Nigeria, is with me today, and we're discussing Nigeria's new electricity roadmap. Onyeche, thank you for your time so far. And we've talked a lot about what the challenges are, and good to hear that Siemens has sat down with the stakeholders to get a broader picture, and just to get a sense of what is wrong and how everyone can proceed with solving some of these issues. But of course, one key factor here is funding. People are asking, how is all of this being funded? We've heard the government say it's a government-to-government thing, but just help us understand it.
Yes, what the Nigerian government mean by say government-to-government cooperation is that the bulk of the solutions we're providing will be financed by the German Export Credit Agency. This is similar to other projects we've done in the world. We're doing a very similar project in Egypt. That was what we've executed in Egypt. And that was 14.4 gigawatts of electricity supplied over 27.5 months. So just under 28 months, we had implemented and energized Egypt with additional 14.4 gigawatts of electricity. There's also a similar concept we're delivering with Iraq, and all these projects are financed by the German Export Credit Agency, Euler Hermes.
So the German government is doing, is doing this through Siemens. Is that a way to put it?
The German government will finance what Siemens is delivering. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, some analysts who have looked at this story or watching it have said that, apart from the regular issues bedeviling the sector, there are issues of corruption, bureaucracy, and they believe that that is a problem or a challenge that you may encounter. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
When it comes to corruption and bureaucracy, for this program, I think we've seen a fantastic working platform with all the stakeholders I mentioned earlier. So with the Ministry of Power, with TCN, with the DISCOs, we've had very robust and transparent communications. All stakeholders have been in the room at the same time. And I think we've had very auditable trails of communication. Also with the Bureau of Public Enterprises, who in essence has been coordinating this effort on behalf of the government.
Okay.
So I think the point is that there is a clear understanding from Nigerians and from the Nigerian government that we need power. It can't be said enough. The deficit of power in Nigeria is massive. I think we have 200 million people utilizing about 3.5 gigawatts of electricity on average. I think sometimes there's a peak of 5.2 that was, I think, seen in 2016, and then 5.1 that was seen last year or so. So it's impossible to comprehend. And we're saying this is an urgent issue. We see the push also for the discos. I think they understand that, the time is drawing near where it's a bleak future if things aren't resolved. We've seen Transmissioner Company of Nigeria as well, who's been investing aggressively, but it's a massive gap to close. And the government is saying we need help. We need the advice and support of a company who's done this before, who understands the landscape. We need help with the financing as well, and that's the German government cooperating with the Nigerian government to bring in this financing. And apart from that, I think what is critical to ensure this plan is sustainable and really that the returns are recovered is that we're also bringing in capacity development. It's a very core part of this program. There's a comprehensive training needs analysis that we're doing right now with the DISCOs, with TCN, with the other stakeholders, understanding the capacity gaps. And we're going to provide training to resolve all those capacity gaps because we've seen where there's a dearth of skills within these agencies. And without having the right people in place operating this equipment, you come back again to the same situation. And we will not just be providing core technical training, but also soft skills training, other sorts of competencies we think are required to run a very efficient system. And we will also support with operations and maintenance support wherever needed to ensure that this infrastructure lasts and stands the test of time, to ensure that whatever solutions we provide are managed effectively and operated with the highest competence.
Okay, what about, the energy mix? We've talked about renewable energy, and I believe Siemens, you have a cocktail of options on the table. So how are you going to proceed with who's going to get what or what will be deployed where?
That's the other part that we're focusing very much on phase one right now, because phase one is where we see us being able to unlock 2 or more gigawatts of electricity from resolving the immediate constraints in the grid. For phases 2 and 3, especially towards phase 3, we're talking about expanding generation capacity. Yes, some plants are coming online. You have Mambila, you have Zungeru, you have other plants that have phases 2 and 3 plans. You have power purchase agreements that have been signed. But we're seeing that there will be requirements for additional generation capacity. And what Siemens is doing to complement the grid studies we're carrying out is also an energy mix study. We understand where areas where even if you build out all the gas infrastructure for Nigeria, you won't be able to have gas-fired technology in all those areas. So we need to complement whatever gas solutions we're providing with renewables. There's also potential for microgrids. There's potential for hybrid solutions, so solar mixed with other sources of power. And we are carrying out a comprehensive study to say where should these plants be located. Maybe in the north it favors solar power. We also have Siemens Gamesa renewables, renewable energy. So we're looking at possibility of wind in some locations, maybe Jos and other similar landscapes. And then we're also looking in the south and saying, how can we leverage gas flare? The government has come up with very strong legislation now that's promoting the utilization of flare gas. And we have solutions as well that can process the flare gas and be used for generating power. So that's another area.
Looking across the power landscape, are there some of this project that you've seen and said, oh, this is great, this is something we can build on, whether it's a rural electrification project or this independent power projects, wherever they are across the country, that you've seen and said, okay, this is something that is great that's happening that we can complement?
Definitely all across the country. In fact, in engaging with the DISCOs, they have urban centers where there's need for additional generation capacity almost immediately. But we are not being presumptuous. I think the good thing about Siemens is we are taking our time to understand what those issues. We understand there's a sense of urgency, but I think proposing quick fix solutions that don't actually solve the problems is also a risk. Okay. So we're carrying out very detailed studies to understand, are those gaps there because the transmission and distribution infrastructure is weak? and the power from existing generation is just not getting to those end consumers? Or are those gaps there because they are located so far away from existing high voltage infrastructure? Or are those gaps going to be resolved with power coming through the grid or a distributed decentralized energy system? So I think this is what we will plan use some time to understand, to come up with a solution that says, well, in these remote areas or rural areas, they favor a certain type of technology so that power is affordable and accessible. And then for the urban centers, we could come up with other, and also understanding that there's space restrictions for urban centers as well. So it will influence a lot of the recommendations we're making, but we're not being hasty at this time to make recommendations for generation. Because the issue really is that we have capacity in the grid that isn't getting to end consumers. How do we ensure that that power, and the government is paying for it. So the government is making, I think, losses of over $1 million a year. $1 billion, sorry, a year. How do we ensure that those losses are being recovered now as revenue?
Now, I know that many of the, you're studying the situation, you're studying the landscape, and perhaps will be tailor-made for Nigeria. But looking outside of Nigeria, has Siemens worked with countries with similar power issues as Nigeria? And I mean, what lessons or what leave can you take from those examples?
Well, I spoke earlier about Egypt. I think Egypt is a case study we're very proud of, because the Egyptian government came to us almost in a similar way and said, we have ambitions to grow our economy. Power is a critical enabler for that growth. We'd like to industrialize, and first we'd like to ask you to advise us how to grow power capacity. And there we came up with a solution, and we delivered it. We also complemented it with vocational training. So what is unique in Egypt is also Siemens and the German government provided vocational training institutes to train the cohorts of youth that would be required to work in the same sector. I think now we're even speaking with the Egyptian government about automation of the grid. We're engaging with them on some discussions around how do you use this power now to industrialize. So there are other strategic discussions that will emanate because of this project we have with them. The same thing is going on in Iraq. Egypt and Iraq are very similar climes, so I refer to them both. They have some of the challenges Nigeria has, and in Iraq, I think the issue is twofold. There's a weak grid, but there's also stranded capacity. So in Iraq, we're really supporting with rehabilitating existing power plants, building some new ones, at the same time also trying to support with the metering issues as they have as well, and with the downstream issues to do with distribution of energy. Okay,
I mean, that is fantastic to hear. Also talking to some experts, what they've told me is that, look, they're worried about the whole power privatization exercise. Some have said that it might unravel the whole thing. What do you think?
I think the discos understand the risk of a continued non-poor performance. And what I've seen over the past almost 1 year engaging with them is really a strong eagerness to resolve their challenges. So they understand the risks of not resolving those challenges. They understand the potential, the opportunity that this program provides. They also understand that we've taken their feedback into consideration at every point in time, and that we are engaging with them, sharing with them whatever insights we're gathering. So they see it as an inclusive process where they can influence their own solutions and they can turn around their fortunes.
Speaking about influence, I mean, let's talk about the consumer themselves. There's also, perception issues, the issues where we still have a good chunk of consumers who are not too keen on paying, or they don't believe in a cost-reflective tariff. That's still an outstanding issue. But just getting them to a place where they understand that you have to pay for what you consume. All that estimated billing and all of that just won't work.
Yes. I think the first step the government has taken with regards to the consumers is having the meter asset providers. They have a big job to do in getting confidence of the consumers, in training them, in having awareness workshops with them. It's not just about telling, it's also about hearing from them. Many consumers want to buy electricity. Many consumers can afford to pay an affordable or cost-reflective tariff, but some of them feel they're not getting quality for what they're investing in. So many consumers are switching off the grid altogether and moving to self-generation, where they have not just diesel, but even solar units, and they're completely self-powered. But I think these solutions are just far more expensive than buying on-grid power. The issue for them is the quality of that power. I mean, consumers complain as well about the electricity from the grid destroying some of their assets. So it's about what are the guarantees about getting stable, reliable, 24/7 electricity. And I think if the discos are able to make that commitment, it will take time, it will take communicating with them, it will take engaging, but consumers will start to grow their confidence in the sector. They know there's a trustworthy partner like Siemens in the mix. So maybe that will also start to shift their perception of the sector. The point is to show them that things can work. That's why we're also doing things in phases and setting the realistic expectations. Show them things can work and also get their inputs and start to engage with them to ensure they see the value of this new power.
Of course, we're definitely keeping an eye on this one and to see how it all unfolds going forward. Thank you for talking to us today. I've been speaking to Onyeche Tifase. She's the CEO of Siemens Nigeria. Well, that's it on Beyond Markets. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch the show at 5 p.m. West African time daily and have access to all previous episodes of the show on our website at cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets. And of course, you can follow my Twitter handle too. It's at Esther Awoniyi. From myself and the team, it's bye for now.